That's so loud. Yeah, it's like a light brown. Wait. Right. All right. Hello, everyone. We'll get started with lecture. Today is week 8, and we'll be talking about advanced prototyping. So yeah, kind of a lot to get through today, but it's kind of like a recap of prototyping, but some like more advanced features about it, smart animate, also like renaming layers, how that can be important, and then also prototyping with variables, and then a wrap up. So here's the attendance link if you need. And then here's the slide deck link. So if you want to follow along and then also do like the demos yourself, please type this in and make a duplicate of this file so you can edit it. But yeah. All right, so we'll just get into recap of prototyping, what it is. It's been a little while since we last prototyped, so yeah. Just like as a reminder, prototyping is the process of turning your design concepts into tangible forms, and this can include digital or physical, and this allows them to be tested so you can reveal more insights about them. And within the context of Figma and other prototyping tools, prototyping allows designers to demonstrate how an interface will behave, and it accounts for how users will interact with those interfaces. So prototyping is essentially forming connections between two objects within a frame or within different frames, and it allows designers to define what happens when a user interacts with A and how A gets to B. So there can also be multiple connections from one object or frame. As long as each connection has a different trigger, then you can have as many as there are options. And these are the different components of a prototyping interaction. So you have your trigger, which is how the user interacts with it, the action, which is what happens when the trigger is activated, and then the animation, which determines how the prototype moves from the first frame to the next. And then these are some examples of what the different animations look like. So they can like just dissolve or move in or push. So yeah, that was just a recap of prototyping, but now we'll get into Smart Animate, which is a really cool feature within prototyping in Figma, and it helps you create these seamless, very delightful transitions. So Smart Animate looks for matching layers between different frames, and for layers that match between them, Figma recognizes what has changed between those things and then applies like a transition that makes it look like an animation between the different stages. So for example, if you see like in this little video, it's based on like the pictures of the frames from here, and you'll see like the middle card is changing for each of them, but everything else stays the same. So it'll keep like everything else static on the frame, but just change the thing that has been changed between the layers, to make it look like more seamless and like an animation basically. And also like fades and like things like move in to fill in the gap if you can see, which isn't something you necessarily prototype specifically, but using Smart Animate allows you to kind of make that a lot easier. So you can select Smart Animate from the list of transitions when you're building a prototype, and you can also apply it to other transitions to create seamless animations if you're using like a different type of animation. But yeah, you can create a lot of really cool things using Smart Animate. So one example is like loading sequences. So like this little GIF can be created using Smart Animate and like recognizing the different shapes and things that move around. Um, It can also be used for parallax scrolling. So like if you were to swipe up on an app to reload it, that utilizes Smart Animate. Also different touch gestures like drop downs. And yeah, other things like switches and even for like just illustrative purposes, it's really cool. So to get into some animation properties, this will help you kind of figure out what animation like things to select when you're prototyping. But yeah, just like a little like mini crash course about animation. It uses keyframes that are basically drawings that define the starting and end points of any smooth transition, and they define what action of the frame it is at a certain point in time. And animation can be really complex to simulate lifelike movement. So, for example, like a ball bouncing, you'll notice like it squashes and stretches because of elasticity, and it also has like non-uniform trajectory and speeds. So each keyframe has to be drawn out and specified even with smart animation. So you can think of animation as the evolution of state over time, seeing how an object transforms via scale, rotation, color, etc. helps us determine what keyframes we need to create for whatever animation that we need to portray. So one example is scale. If an object changes in size between frames, Figma will animate using like making it look like it's shrinking or growing when you use Smart Animate. So this is like if you just have a frame with one like circle this size, and then you duplicate that frame, and then you just increase the size of that circle, and then you like make a connection, add Smart Animate onto it, it'll look like it's growing or shrinking when you go between those frames. And then for position, it'll look like it's like sliding or moving smoothly to the other position that that one element is like changed in the next frame. Opacity, it'll like fade and come back in. So yeah, if you're noticing like a similar theme with all of these different animation types, it's always like Smart Animate kind of just like fills in the transition to make it smooth and animated. You can also do it with rotation. So if you duplicate like one frame and then like rotate something inside of it and then make a Smart Animate connections between those, it'll like remember what you altered about the object. So it'll like rotate the same way, same amount as you did when you changed it. So that's something that's really cool. Also fills, it will, animate between solid colors, gradients, or even image fills and create like something very smooth and like a fade. So yeah, that was animation. Now on to advanced prototyping, so putting the transitions and smart animation together. So yeah, you can make connections the same way that we talked about with prototyping, just dragging from like any object in any frame to another frame. And yeah, when you connect two frames to create an interaction, this is how you can start defining your smart animation. So yeah, also recap, this is like what the interaction details look like when you make a connection while you're prototyping. But you'll see under animation, you can choose Smart Animate, and that's how you can attain that cool feature with whatever you're doing between frames. And then also change like the easing to change like the acceleration of like the transition, and you can play around with that to see like what kind of different effect that has. But yeah. Also, if you want to use like a specific animation, like push or move or something to still like get that effect, but you still want the things to stay the same between your frames, like Smart Animate would, you can just check the like animate matching layers box, and that helps you achieve the Smart Animate look while also doing like the original animation that you wanted to do. So yeah, this is really useful for like swiping between apps and something to keep like a nav bar static on your frame or something like that. That's just one example, but yeah. So the layers that do match, Figma will find and Smart Animate between those. And then every layer in it that doesn't match will just have the same animation like push. So since Figma matches layers when using the feature of Smart Animate, it's important to keep track of your layer names between transitioning frames. Otherwise, you might get some weird results and things might not work. So yeah. So here's like one preview of our transition. You can see how the content moves from one frame to the next, but the navigation bar at the bottom shifts, the focus shifts while remaining fixed on the bottom. So this is using Smart Animate. It notices that like all the icons and the rectangle for the nav bar are like in the same spot and called the same thing in each of those frames. So that stays the same, but like the fill and the line changes for each of them. So it animates between that to make it look like it's like sliding over to the next tab. So we'll kind of use this information and do a short animation demo to bring this app to life. So if you go back to the file and then go to the next page, prototyping demo, then you'll see two, but we're gonna do the first one, which is the Smart Animate demo. So I'll just copy this, but if you duplicated this file, which is like right under the name of the file, then you can edit your own and then you can try this along with me. But yeah, okay. Is everyone good to start? Okay. So we have these 4 frames of like, it looks like a Yelp kind of app where you have different restaurants and like a map. And the first thing we're gonna do is go from our main page with like the map and then click on the bottom bookmarks page of the nav bar to shift over to this page. So in order to do that, we're gonna go into prototype mode, which you can just do by clicking prototype on the top right or doing Shift E to just like toggle between design and prototype easily. But we're gonna make a connection from our bookmarks tab on the bottom nav bar and make a connection to the next frame, which is like what we want it to look like when we click on that. And then the trigger will be on click, navigate to, and then for animation, you can either choose Smart Animate, or you can choose like push or something, and then also click like the animate matching layers little checkbox to make sure that it's still like Smart Animates everything that's the same. But yeah, that should, if you preview this now, you should be able to see that if you click on it, it'll shift to the next page and the nav bar will like stay fixed. Does that step make sense, or does anybody want me to do it again? Thumbs up if you got that step. Good. Okay. We'll move on then. Okay. So we prototype to get to the bookmarks page, but we also want to be able to go back to the destinations page. So we're gonna do like the same thing, but from the bookmarks page, we're gonna select the little like arrow icon on the bottom to go back to the destinations page. And then since it's like kind of the same action, we'll keep everything the same, but I'm just gonna change the direction of the push so it like goes back. And then if you preview this again, you should be able to go between the 2 pages, and then you'll see that like the nav bar still stays the same. And then I'm gonna do this for all the other pages after that, so I can always be able to go back to the destinations page, whether like I'm on one of these other frames too. So I just kept all the settings the same and just made 2 more connections. But the next thing we're gonna prototype is like dragging and deleting one of these cards. So from our second frame right here, we're gonna click on the gather card. That's like the second one. And then we're gonna make a connection from this rectangle to the whole next frame. And then instead of doing on click, this is gonna be on drag, since that's how someone would interact with this item. And then it's gonna be navigate to, and I'm just gonna set it to Smart Animate. And that will be that. And then after this, once you drag it out, you'll see this like trash button appear. So we're going to make another connection from just like the red rectangle and have it go to the last page where it's gone. And then this will be on click and then everything else the same. So we can preview that what we have so far. You can go to the bookmarks page and then drag out this card and delete it, and then it'll slide out. And then the last thing we have to do is do the undo button. So if you click on the undo button of the last frame, you can create a connection to our first bookmarks page. And then that'll be on click. Basically everything else the same, and keep Smart Animate on. And then it'll like bring it back. So if we preview that, we delete it. And then if we click undo, it'll just fill it right back in. And yeah. Did everybody get all those steps? Yeah. Any questions about this? Yeah. Oh yeah. So does your frame, like the first one, have the little flow starting point?
Yeah, I was just curious for like other stuff.
Oh yeah. So you can like click on any frame that you have. And then you know like the top right, the like present button with a play. If you do like the little drop down, you can just like preview that as well. So you can also access it from there. Mm-hmm. Anything else? Okay. But yeah, then you should have like a pretty fully functionable little like restaurant app. And hopefully that helps you understand Smart Animate a little better. But yeah, we'll go back to our slides here.
Okay, next we'll talk about renaming your layers. So before Smart Animate, Figma didn't place much importance on layer names, but as Smart Animate is reliant on layer name and hierarchy, this really requires you to change your layer names. And there's a lot of easy ways to rename your layers, as you can see in this GIF right here. You can view and update your layer names using the layers panel in the left sidebar, or by right-clicking the layers, you can rename it by choosing rename or pressing Command R, and you can rename every layer to the same name or add a suffix or prefix. To view matching layers, you can see what layers or objects that exist in other frames or parts of your file. So when you go to the prototype panel and hover over an object or a layer in the frame, Figma will highlight other layers in the frames that it exists in, and it's really helpful for debugging Smart Animation when you're prototyping. So now we're going to talk about how to use animations effectively in UX. So there are 12 principles of UX in motion. You can see all of them. I won't read them all out loud, but your animations should remain functional and serve a purpose to aid the user, not detract from their focus. The point of functional animation establishes well thought out hierarchy and relationships between groups of information. So really be conscious and cognizant of what types of motion you're using and how it could best be most intuitive for your user. Kind of on that point, animation must feel natural. Good design, like you don't really think about if it looks good or bad because it's designed well enough for you to not think that way because it's animated very naturally. So to a certain extent, animations follow the rules of physics via weight and speed. And you can use curves to achieve this effect. And I feel like you guys have all seen the curves exist when you are prototyping. So case one is called context, a good way to indicate the user to the user an action has been performed is to use an animation. So for example, if you have a list of posts that have loading, sliding up can help the user understand to swipe to see more. And animations have practical developments such as asynchronous loading times of information, as you can see in the GIF on the left. Case two is subtlety. A good animation is one that the users don't even notice, as I had previously mentioned. The purpose of an animation is to help the user achieve a specific objective in a super simple and intuitive manner. Your animation should not be at the forefront of the visual experience. It should be something intuitive and at the back of the mind of the user. Case 3 is orientation. It's practical to think of your screens taking on a 2D space like your prototype frames in your Figma file. Your animation should provide a consistent sense of spatial orientation to make applications easily navigable. And your animation should be part of the prototyping process. You should really understand how information flows and how things transition from one section to the next, as it's super important to factor. It's a super important factor to UX and content-driven design. Now we'll have a quick recap of variables. What are they and what are they used for? So variables are reusable definitions like styles that can be assigned to various design attributes like color, numbers, and strings. However, unlike styles, variables can switch between definitions depending on the theme that it is applied. So there are different variable types. You'll see 4 different ones, including color, number, string, and Boolean. Variables can be applied to layers and objects using fields in the right sidebar. So you can see these 4 variable types on the left. You can apply your variables as they are stored locally or in libraries. And to do this, you start by selecting a layer or an object on your canvas. And depending on what type of variable you're using, it'll be applied to different parts of the right side panel. Next, we'll talk about prototyping with variables. So before variables, you can see that the prototyping process is really messy. But after variables, it becomes really clean and a lot easier to process for you as the designer who is prototyping all these interactions. All prototyping interactions have triggers and actions. So variables introduce a new action type where any of the available triggers can update the value of a chosen variable to the value of your choice when you do set variable. How you add set variable is first you go to the prototype tab, select your chosen frame and click on the plus icon to add an interaction. And then you select your trigger and then set variable in the action dropdown. Then you pick the variable that's going to be modified and then type in the new value that you're changing this variable to, or choose an option from the dropdown selections and you press enter, and then that is how you set your variable. Expressions are operations involving values, which can be used to generate dynamic variables. You can write expressions directly inside the fields of the interaction modal using supported syntax rules, or you can use the drop-down selection picker to choose from the suggested variables and operators. With conditionals, conditional logic allows you to define different outputs depending on user inputs. So for example, only enabling a button if all fields are correctly filled, or showing an overlay if a user has not selected an option. And in order to add conditional logic to a prototyping action, you can select the new action type, which is conditional. And conditionals follow the same format of if-else, meaning that if some condition is met, then an action is taken. Else means that another action is taken. So within the context of prototyping, you could think of modes as groups of values for the same variable. The different mode values can be used in prototyping actions for easier customization. And there's several ways that you could use variable modes. One is that you could set mode values based on context. So you could use multiple modes to customize your variable values without needing to edit or create new interactions. You could also use modes and expressions by using the values of different modes to build interactions and perform calculations. Now we'll do a quick demo.
Okay, back to the demos page of the file. So if you go to the bottom, there's a variables demo. Also, I think if you don't have the education status approved yet on your Figma account, you can't use variables or prototype with them. So that is quite unfortunate. But if you can, then you can follow along. But if not, you can also just watch. It's just like a cool thing to be able to do and know. But no worries if you can't. But yeah, we'll just get into this part. So we're going to create a prototype where this text will change based on what picture the user clicks between these like cherries and pears. And so, yeah, the first thing that we're going to do for this is create a new string variable. And how you do this is you're in design mode and you don't click on anything. And then on the right, you'll see like local variables pop up, and then you can click on that. And then you'll see like we already like made them here for like the example demo, but say you're doing this from scratch, you can create a new variable. We'll pick string and then call it selected element, selected item. And then we'll have like the value be empty. And that's how you create a variable, first of all. And then we're basically going to use that to define this text here, which we will then change based on the pictures. But now you select this text layer, and then you're going to apply the new variable by clicking on this variable icon on the top right, and then just assign it the one we just made, which is that one. So now, like this text, whatever it is, it has like this state of being this variable, which we can change later. So next, we shift to prototype tab. And then if you select the cherry picture on the left here, you can create an interaction by like dragging out and just having it go back to itself. And then it'll be on click, and then the action will change it to set variable, and then select the variable we just made. And then we can basically tell it to change that variable to this certain text that we want. So in this case, it'll be cherries, since the picture that we want to be selected is cherries, so that when we click on this picture of the cherries, it'll set the variable selected item, which we just defined, to the word cherries. Yes. And then if you do the same thing for the pear picture, have it go back, on click, set variable selected item to pears. This will create the same thing. And then we can preview this. So, okay, so in our preview now, if we click on cherries, that text will change to cherries. If we click on pears, it'll change to pears. So, yeah, pretty cool. You can use this in other like variables, like if that's color or number, you can do kind of like similar things. You can also like make plus buttons or minus buttons to increase or decrease numbers and stuff like that to prototype with variables. But yeah, was anyone able to do the variable prototyping demo? Okay, sorry guys. If you can't, it's probably because you don't have the education status approved. So you can try to do that again. Just going to like Figma/education and then trying to like verify your status again. But if not, no worries. Like it's not super important to be able to prototype with variables, but that's there if you want to learn. But yeah, any questions about variables or anything like that? Yeah. Oh, what about like talk about it again? For like prototyping purposes? Yeah. So we'll like look at the other demo, for example. So if you look at these frames and like their layers in them, you'll see that like this nav bar is like titled nav bar very specifically, and like for each of them it's the same. But I think like sometimes like if you have them differently named, then it can't recognize that it's like the same object anymore, so it won't be able to like fill in the gaps between the same thing. Let me try to like make a little example. Let's say we have like a rectangle in a frame, And then I call this like red rectangle or something. And then I duplicate this, but I change it to a different color and I call it something else. I'm pretty sure if you prototype this, then you do like smart animate on click and then same thing backwards. Okay, just kidding, it worked. Or maybe if I create another rectangle from scratch, sorry, I'm kind of learning this as I go because I feel like I don't really run into the problem with renaming layers a lot, but if I do that, whoops, and we'll prototype this, like these obviously won't like smart animate between them because it wasn't the same object, and they have different layer names, but let me try. If I rename it the same thing, then it might work. Oh yeah, see now it like shifts between them. So in the case that you're not like copying and pasting the same frame to make those changes, you can still like allow smart animation by just like naming it the same layer. So then Figma will know it's like the same thing to animate between. Does that make sense? Okay, yeah. But I usually just like copy and paste the things so that I won't run into those problems. But yeah. Any other questions? All right. So now we'll just wrap up this lecture. I know there's some confusion about like homework since the dates on B courses were wrong, but homework 7 was due last week and homework 8 will be due next week. And it's just like a little cute Pokemon Pokédex that you have to smart animate. And you can like swipe between different Pokemon and add your own. So it's really fun. And it helps you like understand smart animate in the context of like mobile UX and UI. And then lab 8 will also be more prototyping practice with like a smart home kind of app. So these are very like practical, realistic prototyping examples to help you understand. But the secret word will be pineapple. Pineapples. And yeah, that's just it for this week. Homework 8 and lab 8. But yeah, thank you guys for coming. And if you have any questions, let me know or contact me. But yeah.